and welcome along to the launch of a partnership resource with the Child Poverty Action Group and the National Parent Forum of Scotland. So my name is Margaret Wilson and I'm the chair of the National Parent Forum of Scotland, and delighted to be here tonight to introduce this resource. So I'm going to introduce Sarah and then Mark, and they can tell you who they are and where they come from, and then we can get started. So thanks everybody.
Hi there, my name is Sarah Spencer. I'm the Cost of the School Day project manager at Child Poverty Action Group in Scotland.
Hello, I'm Mark Willis, Welfare Rights Advisor at Child Poverty Action Group in Scotland.
Thanks, Sarah and Mark. And so what we'll do now is Sarah's got a presentation, so she's going to share her screen if all goes well with technology. So and then Mark's going to come in at the end and give us some information as well, and then we will move to the questions that were asked in advance.
Okay, can everyone see the slides okay? Is that fine?
Yep.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to come along tonight. As Margaret says, tonight, along with NPFS, we're launching a new resource and an animation called Talking About Costs and Money at School. This is based on research with parents and carers across Scotland, and it's just been launched today, so it's hot off the press, and I'm really excited to tell you all about it. Trying to move my screen forward. Sorry, technical hitches. Sorry about this, I'm just going to try and share the presentation again.
Just keep calm.
I know, yeah.
That's the main thing.
You see the panic in my eyes.
No, you're fine. Just take your time. Happens to all of us.
Hey, here we go. Right, okay. So tonight I'm going to be telling you about what the resource is and also why we've worked together to produce it. I'm going to explain the 5 main things that parents and carers are saying helps when it comes to effective communication about school costs, and also about wider financial entitlements and support that's out there. These are the things they would like to see in their schools. And after I've done that, I will hand over to Mark, who will tell you a wee bit more about some of the financial support that's out there for children and families. I know lots of you will be in parent councils or parent groups. Some of you maybe not, but throughout I'm going to try and focus on the practical side of things, and try to highlight points where these issues might fit in with your roles, and look at how you can support your schools to be as good as possible when it comes to talking about costs and money. So I hope by the end of tonight you'll have a really clear picture about what parents are saying they need when it comes to communication about costs and financial support at school. I hope you'll be able to understand or be able to start thinking about where you can fit in with this and support it. And hopefully you'll come away with a better understanding of the financial support that's out there and is ready to be communicated to families. The link at the bottom there is to the web page with all the new resources on it, and the email address there is for our team if you need to follow up with me about anything after the presentation. So why did we want to look at this in the first place? Why did it seem important? barriers to talking about costs and money at school come up really often for us at the Cost of the School Day project. In the research we do, in talking to parents in schools, there's a lot of stress and frustration there around costs from some parents. And every so often, usually around about Christmas time, we get emails or contact from parents, and it's usually the same sort of stuff. It's saying, we've had Christmas jumper day, we've had an ice skating trip, we've had to go to the pantomime, there's a collection for teacher presents, we had the book fair last month, the final instalment for a trip is due, you know, we've got uniform, lunch, travel and all of your everyday things on top of that. It feels relentless. What can you do about it? So I always say something, you know, quite sensible around, well, maybe you could approach your school about this. Maybe you could talk to your parent council. And the answer that comes back more often than not, or always, in fact, is no, absolutely not. I don't want to do that. So we've always been really struck by that big barrier that's there for parents having a difficult time being able to raise this at their schools. Lots of parents aren't talking about costs and money at school. I'll talk more in a wee second about the survey that we ran with parents. But in it, we asked about parents' experiences of how it felt approaching their schools with cost and money concerns. And if you see on the left-hand side of the slide here, these are some of the responses that came back. So, you know, guilt, shame, embarrassment, feeling degraded, feeling uncomfortable, feeling judged, fear of repercussions for their children. You know, it is no wonder that it's difficult to talk about these things if those are the emotions underlying it. The barrier for parents is the shame and the stigma that surrounds poverty in general. And shame, you know, as we would all know, it silences people. It makes them hide what's happening, and it makes them say, absolutely not. I'm not approaching my school or my parent council with this. Similarly, when we talk to parents and other school staff about this, we're always really struck by a barrier from their point of view as well. And often there's good intentions there. People don't want to stigmatise families. They don't want to offend them by offering help if it's not needed or offering it in the wrong way. And sometimes, you know, people genuinely don't think there's an issue with financial concerns in their school. And all of that means that some schools aren't talking about costs and money either. And silence around these things has consequences. Parents and carers can feel under pressure with costs. It can affect relationships and overall engagement with their schools if they're frustrated. Meeting school costs on a tight budget can mean cutting corners elsewhere on, you know, essentials like food and bills. And ultimately, it means people might miss out on help with costs at school and on wider financial support that would make life that wee bit easier and help their children to take part and join in. So I've highlighted there some of the really negative emotions and feelings that some parents have reported. But there are also parents who are having really positive experiences with their schools. And, you know, you can see from the quotes here from parents, this is just a selection of those that we heard about in the survey. And we wanted to know lots more about that. You know, these are clearly schools who are getting it right, but what are they actually doing to make parents feel this way? And what should schools be doing from parents' perspectives? So how do we get from the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment and the silence to here with all of these really positive things happening? So to find out a wee bit more, we ran a survey with NPFS in December last year. Thank you very much if you shared it or completed it. And we had a really good response from over 1,800 parents and carers across Scotland. in almost every local authority area. Over a third of those parents had had a change in circumstances due to COVID. The majority of parents were feeling really concerned about money. So were parents who said that they were claiming free school meals, who had maybe been on a low income for longer. And I'm not going to sort of dwell on it, but you know, we all know what difficult times we're living in at the moment. Even before COVID, a quarter of children in Scotland were living in poverty. Really recent figures show that child poverty rates are rising in every single local authority area across Scotland. And we don't know what the full financial impact of COVID is going to be, but I think it's really fair to say that the crisis has been deepening the hardship that many families were facing already, and it's also pushing new families into poverty. So action to kind of reduce child poverty, support families, all of that was really critical pre-pandemic, but it's even more important now, I suppose, is the point that I want to make. In the survey, we asked parents about how their schools communicated about costs and money, the experiences they'd had, and if their experiences hadn't been good, what changes they thought were needed. Their messages were really clear. It wasn't hard work, pulling them together into sort of the main themes here. They were very, very clear. We put them together into 5 key steps to better communication, and that comes in the form of a short animation and a resource for schools, and both of these are totally based on parents and carers' words and experiences. We've also included case studies in the resource from schools who are doing really good work in this area. So I will show you, I'm crossing my fingers for technology. It's gone really well so far. I'm going to show you the animation. It's just a minute long.
Talking about money can be difficult. If you've just gone without something so your kids don't, it might be the last thing you want to think about. But if everyone knew the difference that talking about costs and money makes, it would change lives. Every penny and pound matters to some families. We could all start by being more aware of real-life problems and let families know that everyone needs help at times. When letters and emails acknowledge how many families are struggling, it can be reassuring. Don't assume families are okay financially. Instead, show everyone that you're aware of hidden poverty and explain the support that's out there so nobody gets missed. We really notice when schools do things to take the pressure off. When staff are approachable and understanding, it makes us feel relaxed and able to talk. And when families feel good, children feel like they fit in and are ready to learn. And that's what it's all about. We just want our kids to be happy at school, and when all of this happens, we feel we are not alone.
Okay. So that gives you a wee bit of an idea of what parents and carers were saying was important. I'm just moving forward to the next slide, and I'll tell you more about the 5 key steps to better communication. There we go. Okay, so these are the areas that parents say action needs to be taken in. We've got poverty awareness, leadership and visibility, making no assumptions and letting everyone know, tackling the cost of the school day, and making space for conversations. These are the things parents want from their schools, and these are the things that parent groups and parent councils can absolutely help with. So I'll go through them step by step. Step 1, poverty awareness, be poverty aware. Parents said that they want to see, they want their schools to be aware of and understand about financial difficulties, so that they can be mindful about that in what they plan and what they deliver. and also so that communication and support can be empathic and appropriate. It can be a good response. You remember the words from the first slide, the guilt, the embarrassment, the anxiety. Parents say that what would help with that is an understanding of the really difficult day-to-days that families on low incomes are facing. Linked with that is an understanding about how school costs can add to the pressures that families are facing. Parents say that schools need to understand the impact that requests for money have on them and their children. Frequent requests for money, unaffordable costs, they all have an impact. There are lots of families above the eligibility thresholds for support, families who are struggling with money but maybe aren't eligible to get entitlements and benefits. Parents want their schools to be very aware of that as well. And of the ways in which financial circumstances might have changed recently with COVID. Checking in on that is a really powerful thing for parents. Parents were saying that they want this awareness and this understanding from their staff, but parent councils have a really big role to play here as well, I think. And it's crucial that they are poverty aware as well. We heard that some parent councils inadvertently put pressure on parents through requests for money for fundraising or events. And some parents said that they thought it was important that parent councils and parent groups were as representative as possible of the parent body, with people from all different backgrounds to make more sensitive and inclusive approaches. Now, I'm very aware that that is not straightforward to do, and it's probably an ambition that most parent councils have already. But while working towards that, parents are saying that making sure parent councils are aware of what's going on in the local area, that a lot of people are going to be struggling, and that they take that into account in their planning, that's also going to be really helpful. In the resource, which you'll hopefully take time to go through after this. In the resource at the end of each step, we've got challenge questions. And these are just sort of reflective questions for people working in and with schools to consider when they're looking at how they can improve communication with parents and carers on costs and money. And they're worded in a way that they can be used by school staff, but also by parent councils. So these could be a nice conversation starter at your next meeting, and something to take away and have a think about. I won't go through each of the questions here tonight. I'll just show them after each step so you can get an idea of what's there. Okay. Step 2, leadership and visibility. Again, all of the negative emotions, all of the fears, those are really powerful, and it takes a lot to kind of overcome those and build trust that they're not going to be the reality if you do talk to your school about costs and money. What is needed there, people are saying, is very clear and very visible action on tackling costs and supporting families. Parents say they want an open and a proactive approach from their schools, not hushing it up, but taking a really straightforward, matter-of-fact style in communicating about this. One that makes clear that financial difficulties can happen to anyone in the school community, and the school is keen to help in a discreet, confidential and kind way. Parents say this leadership and visibility can be demonstrated through written communications. There are loads of really nice examples in the resource and in the case studies in the resource, and through just everyday behaviours and attitudes, the things that come, I think, quite naturally from really being aware of the sorts of things that families are facing. Strong and visible leadership, I suppose, about why this is the right thing to do. And why it's important for the school as a whole, I think that can go a really long way to making parents feel confident and comfortable talking about costs and money. This isn't some embarrassing thing that's happening only to you and that you have to keep quiet and worry about. It's an issue for the whole school community. These are some of the challenge questions for step 2. The third step, this is a really important one, I think. They're all important, but this is important in particular. It's really easy, I think, to make assumptions about people's finances. Maybe your school is in quite an affluent area. Maybe nobody's really complained about costs before, so I suppose it must be fine. But parents were saying in the survey, just because financial difficulties aren't always obvious, it doesn't mean they're not there. I think it's important to avoid assumptions for a few reasons. Wrong assumptions can mean asking families for money they just don't have and putting pressure on them. It can mean that information about financial support doesn't reach all of the families who need it. And if it's commonly agreed that, you know, everyone's fine money-wise in this area, in this school, then it's going to be even harder for parents to approach their schools with concerns around costs and money. Parents say there's a few important things to consider here. Firstly, universal communication. It can't be assumed that families are going to be hearing about financial support in other places. Telling everyone what's available means that information gets to all of the families who need it. It means families don't have to ask for help either. It's just given as standard. And it's part of this sort of open, proactive approach to communicating about costs and money that reduces stigma and also opens the door to further conversations and support. When it comes to the types of messages that parents want, it's not too surprising. They want clear, jargon-free information. They're more likely to notice it if they receive it regularly and if there's a dedicated space for it on the school website, somewhere permanent. Again, lots of good examples from schools in the resource. Timing is really crucial. Parents say that it's most useful to get information at transitions, at inductions, at the start of the school year, at the start of each term, and also, really importantly, in advance of application deadlines. It's no good finding out about the school clothing grant if you know you can't get it for another few months. So knowing about that and communicating information in a timely manner is really important. As well as talking about financial support and entitlements, parents want to know when there's help with costs at school. Loads of schools are happy to help with things like trips and resources and clubs and various other bits and bobs. But lots of parents in the survey weren't sure if that existed or not in their schools. Because how would you know if no one told you about it? Parents want schools to tell everyone about it so that anyone can take it up if they have to. And parent councils can be a brilliant way to share information like that. So it's important to think a bit about your role here. We heard from parents who'd found out about support lockdown, not from their schools, as in the school staff, but through their parent councils, and that was really, really effective. Word of mouth, people say that's a really common way to hear about what's happening at school. So worth thinking about how that can be made more of. Parents want the straightforward, matter-of-fact communication that I mentioned earlier. And wording is quite important. It doesn't need to be overthought, but words and phrases like families in need or disadvantaged families or those suffering poverty or PEF children, things like that. All of those kinds of things are likely to have a bit of a discouraging effect on parents if they read them in communications home. Communications that just plainly say what's available and that it's open to anyone who needs it are more welcome. There are, again, lots of examples in the resource of that. And these are the challenge questions for step 3, which again, you can look at in more detail in the resource. Step 4, tackling the cost of the school day. You can see on the clock there on the right-hand side, just a selection of activities that are taking place in schools that parents told us about. Things to reduce the cost of the school day and support children and families. Lots of brilliant things. Parents say they wanted their schools to bear a few things in mind when it comes to any activity that involves costs. Firstly, affordability of really anything that's been planned. Does it incur a cost? If so, is it going to be affordable to a family in your school facing financial difficulties? Secondly, lots of notice when anything is happening that involves a cost. That gives parents time to budget if need be, pay in instalments. And thirdly, optional costs for things like trips and clubs and fun events and what have you. What parents were saying was that these don't feel optional. When your child hears about them, your child wants to go. If your child can't go, then that has consequences for you as a family in terms of happy homes, how the child feels. And if you stretch your budget or cut corners so that they can go, that has consequences for your income. So parents were urging their schools to understand that really costs aren't optional. If you're putting something out there, there's the potential that families who can't afford them will be under pressure to do so. Parents say that the more this is a really important point, I think. Parents say that the more their schools do to reduce costs and support families, the more confident they feel about talking about costs and money. When schools are making an effort to reduce costs and make life easier, when schools are communicating about financial entitlements and wider support, and when they're doing that with everyone, parents were saying that it feels like their schools really understand what's going on and their schools have their back. They feel supported. Regular communication and celebration about that is important, they say. It lets them know what's going on and it gets people on board and lets them see what their school is doing around all of this. And as usual, parent councils and parent groups can absolutely help with all of this. You can consult with parents to find out what their views are on all of this. We've got lots of resources to help with that. You can make sure that your activities don't add to financial pressures. You can share information, financial information, and you can work with your school to make sure that everything mentioned tonight is considered in school policy and in planning. And challenge questions there. Okay, finally, step 5. If there's really widespread awareness of financial difficulties in your school and lots of effort given to reducing costs, sharing information, supporting families, it actually makes it less likely that parents are going to have to contact anyone to talk about costs or money. But when contact does happen, there are a few things parents say help them feel confident and comfortable to do that. Once again, it comes back to those quotes on the earliest slide. Parents say, remember how difficult it is to raise concerns. They want their schools to remember that. Efforts to make this a straightforward process and make really clear what support might be available and how to access it are really valuable. Previously, I was making the point that financial insecurity is an issue for everyone. Information sharing needs to be universal. That's absolutely the case. But parents say that actual conversations about costs are a wee bit different and that the important thing there is discretion and confidentiality and careful approaches. How conversations happen matters. Parents appreciate having options, one-to-one private conversations, email, online, phone, having lots of options there. Who the conversation is with matters, and that's going to vary from school to school, but awareness of their name, how they can help, how to contact them, and the response they're likely to get. Those things really help. And then following conversations, parents say they want their schools to take care in how support is provided. They say that their children can feel embarrassed when support is obviously targeted towards them because they can't pay. And a really good way, I think, to work out what's needed and how support can be best provided in a non-stigmatizing way is by asking the school community. There are lots of resources to do this in the Cost of a School Day toolkit, and it's really the only way to know that you're getting it right in your own particular setting. Okay, so there we have it. I'm done. Talked for longer than I meant to, sorry. The 5 key steps. I hope these are clear, because parents responding to the survey really made them clear. These were the really strong messages coming through. I've been speaking lots about financial information, financial support, but we thought it would be useful to share more about what support is actually available. So I will hand over to Mark now. And Mark specialises in benefits for children and families, so he'll have lots of information to share with you. Mark, if you just tell me when to pop your slides on, whenever you're ready.
That's great. Thanks very much, Sarah. Yeah, I'm Mark Willis, and I'm a welfare rights advisor at Child Poverty Action Group. And yeah, I mean, the main thing, I know this is not your job. It can get very complicated. I know you don't want to be getting too embroiled in it. This is the handbook we produce, which we use to try and help sort things out when they do get complicated. But all we're looking at really today is just a general awareness of what support is available, and just, you know, pointing someone in the right direction, telling them about something, helping them to get advice can make a huge difference. So you can, you know, really help take the pressure off the situation, off the family, really help the child focus on their education if you can, you know, help reduce the financial difficulties they're in. So yeah, that's just what I'll look at in 10 minutes or so. So yeah, next slide, please.
Dear, I am trying, Mark, hold on.
Sometimes it goes a bit funny, doesn't it? The next slide, I can tell, is about child benefit, which is a lovely, simple, straightforward. There it is. There it is. A very simple benefit. We love child benefits at Child Poverty Action Group, and I think it really should be seen as one of the pillars of the welfare state, and we should all be proud of it. It's just a way society sort of values or recognises children, and the support for children is something that society is in the whole of society's interests, really. So it is a simple benefit, and almost everyone gets it. There are exceptions to do with immigration status and looked after children, but other than that, there's no stigma around it. It's just seen as part of what you do after having a baby, that you'll claim child benefit. There is no means test, so you can get it regardless of income or savings, but that simple concept has been chipped away at a bit in recent years. There is now a rule that says higher earners, and that means an individual earning over £50,000 a year has to pay it back through the tax system. But I just think we shouldn't get sidetracked by that. Really, everyone should be claiming it, and research has shown it is used for the benefit of the child. So unfortunately, that rule has maybe just chipped away at that basic simple principle, and then people might start to question, you know, should I be getting it? What if this happens? What if that happens? But really, the bottom line is, yeah, people should be claiming child benefit. And even if there is a higher income taxpayer it's either the parent or partner, it's still important, because claiming child benefit protects your national insurance record as well. So it values that role as a parent. Okay, but on its own, it's clearly not enough to bring up a child on. It's £21.15 a week, or £14 a week for other children. But importantly, there's no limit to how many children you can get child benefit for. I'm sure you're probably all aware of a 2-child limit that has come in to means tested benefits, but it does not affect child benefit. So that is still payable per child. Okay. So yeah, that's child benefit. Next slide, please. Okay. The next slide then is about universal credit or tax credits. And just briefly, it's one or the other. Most families will be getting tax credits if they've got children, around the age of 5 or 6 and school age, are probably still in the tax credit system. But if people have claimed support in recent years, they may well now be getting universal credit. So universal credit is replacing tax credits. But there's a similar concept to them in that they are quite wide-reaching, and they can support families in or out of work on low incomes. And really, the majority of recipients are actually in work, and the majority of families in poverty are in work. As you know, someone in the household is in work. So it's really important support, but it does extend quite far up the income range. I mean, I would estimate it's around 45% of all families in Scotland, families with children, would be eligible for some universal credit as it is now. It might only be a small amount, but it is worthwhile. So the amount does depend on the income, earnings, etc., but it can be worth a lot more. So as you can see, that is the main source of support for a child, bringing up a child up to 50, 60 odd pounds a week. Importantly, more can be payable for a child with a disability, but you have to claim another benefit before that can be payable. And also it can include help with childcare costs for working parents. So again, even if at first glance income might appear too high, once you add in rent, childcare costs, disabilities, other needs, they may well get some universal credit. And again, even if that amount on its own doesn't seem worthwhile, it can act as a passport to other help, other supports, which, next slide, please. So the ones we looked at so far are UK benefits dealt with by the Westminster government. But as you probably know, some powers around social security have been devolved to Scotland. So this is the Scottish government's opportunity to really put what they've been saying about making Scotland the best place to grow up and getting it right for every child, really put that into practice in financial terms and provide support for children. So one of the things they've introduced, as I'm sure you know, is the Best Start grant, which provides support around pregnancy and within 6 months of a baby's birth. And then again, around the age of 2 to 3.5, there's another grant that's been introduced, and the school age payment, which has been introduced for children at the age they're ready to start school. And the way they deal with this one is slightly different from the first 2 payments. So there may be a bit of room for confusion, because you have to claim within a certain window. So you can't actually make an application. Also, you can. It's 1st of June. You can make an application from today, 1st of June. So the application window is just opened for the group of children who are eligible to start school this August. And that depends on their date of birth. It doesn't actually matter whether they start school or whether they've maybe deferred a place. It's about being eligible to start school in August. Okay, but they don't necessarily have to rush, but they do have to get the claim in before 28th of February next year. And bear in mind, some people might not be in a position to get it now, but at some point later in this window, their income might have changed and they're getting universal credit. And that means they can get the Best Start grant. So it's for lower income families. And the way they identify lower income families is any amount of universal credit or tax credits is enough to qualify. Okay. Next slide, please. So the next one that the Scottish Government has just quite recently introduced this year is the Scottish Child Payment. And that's an extra £10 a week per child. And currently it's only for children under 6. So it's slightly limited relevance for the school age, but there's some point where they can get in. But unfortunately, at the moment, it stops when the child turns 6, which is a bit disappointing. But there is a pledge to extend it to children under 16 by the end of next year. So they say it's about getting the income, the data, the information about families to actually make the payments. That's part of the reason why it's been limited, but that commitment is there. But again, it's about lower income families, and any amount of universal credit or tax credits is enough to qualify. And I suppose just being aware, if you know there's younger children in the household, younger siblings, and then again, it's just worth mentioning because people might not know about it because it's new. Okay, yeah, next slide, please. And then, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's support specific to being in school. There's free school meals, there's a clothing grant, and what the Scottish Government has done during the pandemic is use that data, that group, to identify who's most likely to benefit from extra support during the pandemic. So that's how they identified who should get a COVID hardship payment. So the basic criteria for free school meals, it's a bit more targeted. So it's not the same group as we looked at already. It's more targeted. So you have to be getting universal credit or tax credit, and you do have to be on a low income. And it does translate as a pretty low income. That's around 15 hours a week at the minimum wage. Yeah, obviously things can vary, and people's wages vary, 0 hours contract, etc. But yeah, if they're within that bracket, then they can get free school meals. The clothing grant, generally, a lot of local authorities use the same criteria, but there is discretion, so it can be more generous, and it does vary around local authorities, so it's always worth checking that. And yeah, that's how the Scottish Government made payments. They called it a winter and spring hardship payment, and actually they've renamed it now. It's going to be called the family pandemic payment, and the next one is due in July, and then there'll be another one in January. But that's the reason why it is very important to apply for school meals, to be in that, you know, data sets who will be identified, and the payments in most local authorities, I think, are made automatically for people in that group. And lastly, another thing just to be aware of in relation to COVID is the self-isolation support grant in Scotland, which is a £500 for people who, one, they're notified to self-isolate either because of positive test or close contact, or they're at the care of a child who's required to self-isolate, i.e. sent home from school, and then the parent has to take time off work. And that's specific to Scotland, that one, so you might not hear about that on the news so much. That's a rule that they introduced in Scotland. But you must also be in work on a low income, and again, it's looking at qualifying benefits to identify low income in most cases, but even without the benefit, it's still worth looking into, because there is some discretion around that. Okay, and yeah, losing income as a result. Okay, next slide, please. And yeah, as I say, you don't want to be giving advice if it's not your job, and you can get into difficulties if someone's unhappy with the advice and they end up losing money. You know, that can be a major concern. So you can find out more information for yourself. You can point people where to go for more information. There's online information, online benefit calculators. Ideally, they'd maybe want to sit down and have an appointment with someone. It could be the local authority, it could be CAS, that's Citizens Advice, of course, or it could be a housing association. In a lot of areas, they have a dedicated welfare rights worker. Okay. And next slide there. And then, yeah, we talk about signposting and referrals, but really it's referrals are best. Signposting is just obviously giving someone a number, which is better than nothing. But a referral is really making the appointment and knowing that they go to the appointment, maybe even hearing what happened after it. So yeah, it takes the pressure off the individual having to, you know, maybe, you know, go and contact someone. And no, as Sarah was saying, the issues around stigma and so on, it can be difficult to make that leap and ask for help, and then you have to go somewhere else. It obviously can be off-putting. So yeah, that is the idea, if possible, for it to be a referral and sort of smooth appointment with an agency, an independent agency. Next slide. And then this isn't for the general public, unfortunately, although we do specialize in welfare rights. It's like second tier sort of consultancy for other advice agencies, and we do training, as I say. So if you're one step removed, if you're trying to help a family, or even just to find a local advice agency, you can give us a ring and we can try and help you in that role as providing support, but just one step removed from the parents. But you can give us a ring or email. That's it. Thank you, Sarah.
Brilliant, thank you so much. We need some time for questions. I'm so sorry, we've gone on for ages, haven't we? But I suppose just to sum up some takeaway points from tonight. We're better than schools to do this sort of thing. It's where parents are, it's a place that's trusted. As Mark was saying, support is out there. It's not perfect, doesn't reach everyone, not everyone's eligible for it, but a really big thing is that families don't know it exists, and you can help them find out about that. Getting what you're entitled to takes financial pressure away. It means children can take part at school and elsewhere, and taking action on this in school, it builds trust and confidence in good relationships. It's not difficult. There are some really practical things that we can all do around this, and parent councils and parent groups can play a really big role in all of it. And we will stop talking now. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, both of you. That was really interesting to get, because as a parent council chair myself at a primary school, we often get asked, and we do signpost, but it's actually getting a bit more of that information. It's good to see what's available, so very important, and maybe not get too involved, as you say, with referrals, but certainly signposting parents would be the best thing that we could do. So what I'll move on to is the questions that were put in, but parents registered that are on tonight, and then I noticed that there's two in the questions have popped in. So just to remind everybody, if you do want to ask a question, put it in the Q&A function and we can ask Sarah and Mark, okay? So the first one that we'll ask is, should P1 to 3 parents apply for the free school meals if they are eligible to ensure that the school receives the equity fund? By that, I recognise that all P1 to 3s get a free meal, but do those eligible for equity fund need to fill in the application, as this is not happening at our school? So how important is that? Who's going to answer that one?
Mark, do you want to take that one?
Well, yes, I would say
Thanks,
yes. They should apply for free school meals. I don't know so much about the pupil equity fund as being the reason, but at the moment the reason is in order to get that extra pandemic payment, that £100 that was paid in winter and spring. That was the way they did that, was identifying who has applied and is registered for free school meals. So even though they get them in the P1 to 3 anyway, that you still go through that process, and then you're on the database, basically, as far as I understand it.
Yeah. As far as I'm aware, the P1 to 3 PEF allocations are done on estimates of how many people they think in the school should be registered, going on historic data. The information should absolutely be shared, and parents should be urged to apply for the same reasons that Mark was saying there. And also because in some local authorities, free school meal and school clothing grant applications are combined. So if you don't apply for free meals, you might be missing out on clothing grant as well. Yep.
That's a good point to remember then, yep. Right, so the next question that was asked in advance was, if you had more funds, what are the first things you would address to bridge the gap and alleviate stress around the cost of the school day?
I'll take this one.
That's a very difficult one. What would you prioritise?
It's me. Limitless funds, let's say. Well, if there were limitless funds, then I think we would be looking to make education genuinely free for children and young people and their families. I think the priorities and the barriers are different in every school, but I think we would find really common problems that families face are the costs of uniform, paying for curriculum costs in secondary schools and resources and so on, and trip costs as well. I think they're probably the main three that I would say are the things that funds could go towards. And actually it's interesting because the SNP manifesto before the election did pledge action on all of those areas, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops and what support is put in place. But I would say it's not necessarily about if we had more funds. I think there are lots of things that can be done that don't cost money that can really support parents. All of the poverty aware attitudes that I was talking about earlier, that's free. Helping families receive their entitlements, that's free. I think it's not always about money, but it does help. Yeah.
Okay. And the third one we got in advance was, how can parent councils fundraise effectively though and support parents at the same time?
That's me again, Mark. Hoping we get one about financial entitlements soon. Or benefits.
I think it's you.
So I think poverty aware fundraising, I don't think that means no fundraising, is what I would say. It just means quite thoughtful and inclusive fundraising, with the question in your head of, is this going to put pressure on families? If so, can we do it in a different way? I think some good ideas we've seen are making it donation only fundraising rather than you will bring in £5 for this, that and the other. If you're doing special days, thinking about whether kids have to go and buy extra clothes for it or other things, lots of notice, not springing things on folk on the Tuesday and it's meant to be paid for on the Thursday. Using the skills in your community is a really important one, I think. What's an example? Parents who are good at photography, getting them in to do the school photos rather than whatever those companies are that charge a phenomenal amount of money for school photos, and then selling them for a not very much, and making lots of money for that to support parents. Applying for local grants, sponsorship from local businesses. I think all of these things are much harder than just running a big event and charging loads for tickets and entry. They're much harder, they are, but it does mean everyone's included. So I suppose ultimately it is all about your school community and what's appropriate for it. So I think consulting with parents about cost.
Just being more mindful, I suppose, isn't it, of everybody's. They just be more mindful and by doing something,
and just
are you excluding a group without thinking it through? I suppose that would be it, wouldn't it? So here's the next one then. So rolling out free school meals, year groups and dates. What can parent councils do to support families with the cost of school? Well, I think you've already answered that one. So we'll move on to the next one. It says, please can you tell us if you have an update on the PEF funding in Scotland and if it will continue or what will replace it? And I know we spoke about this earlier and you got an answer, so you can let us know.
I did. Okay, because I am not the person to decide or know about that, but I found out. On the previous question, just in case this is what the person meant, the rolling out free school meals, the year groups and the dates, it's extended to P4s from this August, then extended to P5 from January 2022, and then it'll be extended P1 to P7 August 2022. So that's the timetable for that. And then, yes, I asked someone in the PEF policy unit at Scottish Government about the update on PEF funding, if it will continue or what will replace it. And he said, and don't mind me reading off what he said, he spoke about all of the investment that's happened already. And he says, ministers have been impressed with the creative and innovative ways head teachers have invested PEF to raise the attainment of children in their schools. Work is underway to develop evidence-based options for future efforts to tackle the attainment gap via a Scottish Attainment Challenge 2.0 programme starting in 2022-23. So April 2022, that will build upon the successful work taking place. An advisory group is helping shape the work, which will aim to accelerate and deepen recovery and progress. No decisions have been taken, that's the main point, and we'll continue to work closely with key stakeholders. So yeah, I think watch this space on that, although I do wonder if allocations will be done differently due to the extension of free meals from P1 to P7. I don't know if they'll have to go about it differently. But the contact at Scottish Government said he was very happy to answer questions on that or discuss it more. So Margaret can maybe share the email address of that person with anyone who's interested.
That's great, thanks. Sarah, of course, I was so busy looking at the second part of that question, I brushed over the first part. So what was the rolling out of the free school meals? So that's because it was in the manifesto. So say those dates again then.
They are by this August 2021, it'll be extended to P4s. January 2022, it's up to P5s, and then it'll be fully P1 to P7 by August 2022.
That's great, thank you. I didn't, as I say, I was looking at the second part and was like, didn't actually dawn the first part. So, right, we've also got some questions in the function. So what I'll do is I'll bring Cheryl, because I've been listening intently to you, so she can bring, ask the questions that are in the Q&A. Where is she? There she is.
Here. Just to clarify for parents who don't understand what PEF stands for, it's Pupil Equity Fund at all schools, and it goes by your entitlement to free school meals. Now, we've had quite a few questions on and off regarding the Pupil Equity Fund, some of which you have covered, and others are more about schools that don't actually have Pupil Equity Fund and how can they alleviate costs towards like supporting their parent councils so don't put more pressure financially, especially as a direct result of the pandemic. Is there any way you could advise?
So I suppose it goes back to the question previously around, if you had limitless funds, what would you do to alleviate costs? If you don't have limitless funds and you don't have much PEF, then of course it's more challenging, isn't it? And then I think I can only repeat the ideas that I'd said there around looking outside of the school for support, not relying on parents to support the fundraising, so grants, local businesses and so on. There's lots. Do you know what? There's lots of good ideas in the Parent Council toolkit that ourselves and NPFS put together a couple of years ago, which I'm sure you've all read. So there's lots of ideas in there for how to do that. But again, not everything costs money. It's not all about PEF. That just helps very much.
Thank you so much for that. The next question we got is probably best, maybe Mark, this might be aimed at you. So we've received a question on the Parent Council. They touched on money matters at the last meeting. And one point that kept coming up frequently was the form filling, which parents and carers reported is quite daunting and challenging. And a question of staff at the schools are able to help. They weren't sure if any teachers would want that responsibility in case it's filled in incorrectly. Would your advisors be able to guide any teachers in this field or support parents or parent councils on how to go about doing this in the right manner?
Yeah, teachers could ring us and we could maybe help discuss whether it is maybe a form that's quite straightforward and they can maybe help fill it in. It really, it's maybe partly a literacy issue in some cases, or different languages, and people just aren't sure what the questions are getting at. For example, the Scottish child payment form really is pretty quick and straightforward, but on the other hand, if it's a disability benefit, it takes a good few hours really to fill it in properly. It can get very complicated, and it is also really important that it is filled in, you know, with the help of someone who knows what the criteria is really. So yeah, I'd say we'd be happy to help make that sort of judgment. It'd be fine to give us a ring to discuss that.
Thanks, Mark. Sarah, this is probably one for you. It's looking for, could you please give advice or suggestions on how to encourage a more diverse group of parents to join a parent council, as mentioned by yourself earlier in your presentation?
Gosh, I know it's difficult. I definitely don't have any perfect answers for that, but I think that you know what I was saying around consulting about costs and trying to get a picture from the parent body of, you know, what are opinions on costs, what do we need to do about them. That's a really simple thing that a parent council can do, and it gives you lots of useful information. And it's part of kind of reaching out to people. And, you know, if you're doing that while also doing your usual stuff around, you know, come to meetings, join in, do this, do that, then it can be part of the same approach, I think. But I do recognise, you know, how challenging it is, well, sometimes to get anyone on your parent council. Yeah, looking for absolute diversity and representation across the board is really tricky. It's just about trying it in lots of different ways, I think, and showing that you want it to happen. Yep.
Thank you. Mark, this one might be more best suited to yourself. Is there a central place where parent councils can find out about specific grants which may be available? It's hard to know where to start when you've got really no idea where to look for.
It is difficult to know where to start. Yeah, in terms of grants, if we're talking about the Best Start grant, there's a lot of information just on mygov.scot about how to apply for them. And also on our website as well, we maybe go into a bit more detail. I can put the link in the chat there. But yeah, more generally, I think if you're looking at charitable trusts and those sorts of grants, that is quite difficult. I think Turn to Us, again, I'll put the link up somewhere. Turn #2 Us is a website that helps locate grants, you know, maybe to do with just local areas or circumstances, disabilities, health conditions. There might be some other places to go as well as the state, the government support that we've looked at.
At the in the talking about costs and money resource, on the back page of it, there's a resources section, so it's got links to a few of the things Mark was talking about there around school-based entitlements.
Thank you. I've received another question. So this one says, what is your suggested response to parents who suggest that some children lose out on valuable trips or experiences because they're not organised? So a kind of failure in the school to organise for fear of that there's worry or there's pressure and worry put in families not able to afford it. Do you have anything to best advise this parent?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I think that parent councils can't do this on their own, but you know, developing a really good approach to talking about costs and money, to cost of the school day. It's the whole school community, it's staff and parents together. So it's about that leadership that I spoke about earlier. It's about leadership about why this is the right thing to do. And it's about involving parents in that, to looking at alternatives for expensive trips, if that's what it is that's going to be changed in the school. If you're involving people along the way with that, and there's a strong leader who's pushing that forward, that can really help, I think, because you're going to be thinking of alternatives. You're going to be thinking of things that are as good, and that more people can become, that can be included in. So it's not easy, because people are going to kick off and say, you know, you're banning everything. But that is more likely to happen if a change is just introduced suddenly, and you know, we're not doing World Book Day this year, or you know, we've cancelled all the trips. Like, of course, parents are going to kick off about that. If it's a process and it involves parents and carers along the way, that can help. But I'm not pretending it's really straightforward and easy.
Thank you. We received one of these questions earlier. It says, many of the issues you mentioned, e.g. trips, additional events, etc., are not affordable for many. Is it not about time we talked about finding the schools differently? As in, why is there not an equitable fund, a specific fund for every pupil as such? Then the school and parents can decide how to spend it, uniform school library meals for all kids. And I think this means separately to the pupil equity fund, obviously, because it's not available in every school.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. If it's something that's provided at school, you know, it's you know, the curriculum is everything at school, isn't it? It's not just about kind of sitting in your lessons and doing exams. It's everything. It's about all of your experiences at school. So it's, if some pupils are able to join in on that and others aren't, then there's a real equity issue there. And absolutely, I would fully support more support in that area. Talking again about the manifesto commitments before the election, there was a pledge there for greater support around the cost of trips. So again, that'll be really one to keep an eye on, and hopefully one where there's a wee bit more funding and support, so that every child can access trips and experiences.
Thank you so much. Another question we received is, many parents don't feel comfortable approaching the school to speak about any financial concerns that they might have. Can you suggest any ways that we can remove these barriers?
I think have a look at the resource, because I've touched on a few points tonight. I won't sort of repeat myself. I've talked lots, but there are some good practical things dotted through the resource about how you can kind of go about this. Again, it's not about doing it on your own. It needs to be done along with your school, along with school staff, and so that it's a whole school approach. But dead simple things like just making that communication more open, and you know, talking about costs and money. That's really the best start for helping parents come forward.
Thank you so much. That's all the questions we've received so far, Margaret.
That's fine. We're actually over by 10 minutes, so I'm getting the, you know, come on now, wrap it up. There's nothing unusual there than that. So just really need to say thank you, obviously, to Sarah and Mark for coming tonight to support us, and you know, absolutely thrilled that we've been involved in this partnership. I think it's a really good resource for parents and parent councils, so really pleased about doing this tonight. So thank you again, and obviously to the parents who've been listening to us all this time. Thanks for asking the questions and your time, and what we'll do is we'll get this recording up on our website so that, you know, everybody can get access to it. It'll be on our YouTube channel, but we'll certainly get it advertised out in the resource for everybody who's been on as well. We can get that we'll put it on the website as well, so that it's all accessible to as many parents as possible. And we've also been live tweeting during the event, so you'll be able to go in and have a wee look and see what's been going on, both of you, after this, because you've been concentrating, answering all the questions. So thank you all very much, and good night.